My name is Jonathan Bailey. I'm here to deliver a presentation on the Bangladesh Bank cyber heist. Alright, now let's get started. As it goes, in February of 2016, the Central Bank of Bangladesh was hit by a large-scale attack, an attempted $1 billion heist set in motion right under their noses. While the hackers did not end up carting off the entire billion-dollar amount, they initially managed to make off with around 101 million, of which 20 million was fortunately caught before it made its way into the hackers' hands. The attack itself took place sometime within the frame of February 4th and 5th, because during this time, Bangladesh, like other devout Muslim countries, starts its weekend a day before what we are used to, which is to say that the weekend in Bangladesh is Friday and Saturday, as opposed to our Saturday, Sunday. You get the gist. The hack sought to send 35 payment orders to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, totaling $951 million, which would then process those orders to banks across Asia, most notably to Sri Lanka and the Philippines. The timing of the attack was impeccable. The weekend in Bangladesh begins at the day's end Thursday, and work resumes that Sunday. By the time the director of Central Bangladesh Bank had realized something was wrong, the reserve was closed, as it was Sunday. Not to mention that Monday was Chinese New Year, so banks in the Philippines were closed in observance. Now, I'm saying payment orders, but what do I mean by that? What exactly do I mean? These aforementioned payment orders sent by the hackers were issued using Bangladesh Bank's account on the SWIFT messaging system. Now, SWIFT stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, and is the global standard for facilitating transactions between different countries. SWIFT itself does not handle transfers. Rather, it is the medium through which those payment orders are sent between the correspondent accounts of member institutions. Bangladesh seemed to get two lucky breaks, however. Of the 35 orders fraudulently sent out on February 4th, 5 were acted upon. 4 of them ordered funds to be sent to 4 dormant bank accounts in the Philippines, totaling $81 million, and 1 was sent to a non-profit in Sri Lanka, totaling $20 million. The bank handling the Sri Lanka transfer thought the amount was unusually large for a small non-profit, so they requested verification from the routing bank, which noticed a spelling error in the order. That bank then halted the transaction until they heard from Bangladesh Bank, and they were met with the stop payment order message. The second bit of good fortune directly related to the number of orders that were withheld. By sheer coincidence, the Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation branch in the Philippines was located on Jupiter Street, and the use of the name Jupiter automatically flagged the 4 transactions for manual review. By sheer coincidence, a company by the name Jupiter Seaway Shipping was on a sanctions list for evading sanctions against Iran, which is what set off the automated systems in response to RCBC's Jupiter branch. Upon further inspection of the orders, the remaining 30 were completely halted, and the Reserve Bank sought to get in touch with Bangladesh Bank. Now, if I may put a general timeline into place for you, those 4 bank accounts I just mentioned were actually created 9 months prior to the actual attack. So, back in May of 2015, on the 15th, 4 bank accounts were opened at the RCBC Jupiter branch in the Philippines. And then we fast forward those 9 months, and we see on the 4th, Thursday, the workers at Bangladesh Bank go home, and the Bangladesh weekend begins. Unfortunately for them, this is also when the hack began. Payments to RCBC flagged by a stroke of luck. Those 4 payments that used the name Jupiter, of course. And had that flag not happened, the hackers would have probably gotten their hands on $150 million more dollars, but that was not the case. By the 5th, the $81 million hits those 4 accounts at RCBC. We can fast forward to the 7th, a Sunday, where the Bangladesh workers return to work, but no one is at the Federal Reserve in New York because it's still the weekend in the U.S. Bangladesh discovers the hack, which was actually strange in the way that they discovered it, because the director noticed that the printer wasn't working, and the specific printer was meant to print out transactions in real time. So them going there and seeing no transactions on the deck, they assumed that something was just wrong with the printer, which there was. They fixed it, but they also noticed there was something wrong with their Swift system, and they fixed that too. And then they discovered that there were more transactions than there were supposed to be. And they looked over those transactions and saw millions and millions of dollars doled out from their bank account with the reserve. Um, in seeing that, they decided to send out those payment order stop messages to the reserve and to the Philippines, but it's Sunday, so they get no reply. Um, by Monday, Chinese New Year, the Federal Reserve is back working again. They get those stop orders. The deal with the 850 million, they weren't able to stop the 101 million that was sent out uh, to the Philippines and Sri Lanka in time, but the 20 million did get back into Bangladesh's hands, as I mentioned earlier, um, and the 80 million was unfortunately pocketed by the hackers. Um, Chinese New Year did close the RCBC, as I also mentioned earlier. And then on the 9th, the SWIFT messages sent from Bangladesh to the Philippines go unread. And this is due to a bit of conspiracy. It is believed that um, a, a banking official at RCBC, someone of high status there, was in on the whole heist, that they knew certain aspects. And to facilitate that 80 million reaching the hackers, they helped set up those accounts 9 months prior to the attack, and also ensured the money got into those accounts when the attack occurred. So the majority of that 80 million vanished, essentially. These constant delays and the inability to make contact proved to be paramount to the high success, as $80 million were, at the time, successfully injected into 4 Philippines bank accounts and laundered in casinos. This heist is officially known as the largest cyber heist to date. Now let's talk about the victims. One could make a broad statement and say that the Central Bank of Bangladesh was the victim of this cyber attack. And while this wouldn't be incorrect, it's a very broad answer. It doesn't help us especially. To correctly identify who is affected, we have to know what funds this bank handles and what it uses them for. We need to know the functions of Bangladesh Bank. And such functions include maintaining price stability through economic and monetary policy measures, managing the country's foreign exchange and gold reserve, and regulating the banking sector of the country. The Bangladesh Bank is the central bank of the entire country, and as such has a lot of functions. It has a lot going on at Bangladesh Bank, which includes, and I suspect is not limited to, the formulation and implementation of monetary and credit policies, the regulation and supervision of banks and non-bank financial institutions, as well as the promotion and development of domestic financial markets, management of the country's international reserves, issuance of currency notes, regulation and supervision of the payment system, as well as acting as banker to the government, money laundering prevention, collection and furnishing of credit information, implementation of the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, and managing a deposit insurance scheme. A heist against the highest bank in the country most assuredly hurts the entire country. The residents, the taxpayers, governmental institutions, they all take a hit from such an attack. Such a large-scale incident also threatens foreign exchange, not merely with Bangladesh, but with any nation with a growing economy. It's a scary thing when this happens. These central banks often cannot afford good security, good software, or hire a proper specialist to configure their network. They are low-hanging fruit. And to further that point, I have here in this image a ranking of 70 different countries' cybersecurity. And Bangladesh on this ranking is 7th. And initially you'd say, well, that's really good, 7th out of 70. But this ranking is reversed. So the higher you are to the 70th country, the better your ranking is. So Bangladesh is all the way at the bottom, essentially. They're doing better than Algeria, but they're still not doing so hot. These countries receive their ranking based on the following criteria: the percentage of mobile devices and computers infected with malware, the number of financial malware attacks, the percentage of all telnet attacks by originating country, the percentage of users attacked by crypto miners, the best prepared countries for cyber attacks, and the countries with the most up-to-date cyber legislation. Those 7 things amount to this ranking, and as you can see, Bangladesh, is not doing very well in the grand scheme. Now let's talk about the social engineering aspect of this heist. As out of place as this may sound for an attempted billion-dollar heist, the systems of Bangladesh Bank were compromised by phishing emails. One of the bank's employees had unknowingly put malware on his workstation after opening one such email, and once the computer was infected, the hackers just watched. They spent a month simply observing the workers and the operations of the bank before finally striking on February 4th. If I may continue, writ large, the attack and entry into the Bangladesh bank 2 years ago took place by sending phishing emails to employees of the bank, and upon snaring some unwitting victims, gaining access to the bank's network and enabling them to send messages via Swift. What's noteworthy is that these weren't simple phishing attacks with large nets cast, but spear phishing attacks on specific employees who were spied on by chosen Expo account holders, which also occurred in the Sony Pictures hack. If we want to mitigate this sort of attack, this spear phishing that goes on at this high level, I believe that the best strategy to employ would be the use of DMARC authentication. DMARC standing for Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting, and Conformance. It offers email receivers a way to verify if a message is really from a purported sender or not. Importantly, it also lets organizations set policies for what to do with email that purports to come from their domains but is actually from somewhere else. It is my opinion that companies would do well to verify their email and web filters are set up properly, and possibly move downloaded email attachments into a sandbox automatically to analyze them before they can be opened or distributed. And that last bit may seem a little extreme, all things considered, but when we're talking, like this kind of invasion, this kind of breach happening to the central bank of a country's government, I don't think something like quarantining file attachments is too terribly invasive or too extreme of a measure to pull. This kind of thing should not happen because the amount of money that hangs in the balance, as we saw, could have been $1 billion if Bangladesh just wasn't lucky. Which brings us full circle. Let's talk about what we've learned from this. If this attack has taught us anything, it is that without proper communication channels, even software like Swift, with its impenetrable security, can be taken advantage of. It also shows that, unfortunately, people everywhere are susceptible to phishing, and as can be deduced from the month of time the hackers had access but went undetected, Bangladesh Bank was not monitoring its employees or their workstations closely enough. In order to mitigate such an attack in the future, developing countries and countries with quickly growing economies need to take the same security precautions as established countries. As for the issue of communication, that has since been addressed. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York instituted a 24/7 hotline to handle such cases, a hotline that more than likely would have prevented such a large-scale crime from succeeding. And that concludes my presentation on the Bangladesh bank heist. Thank you.